Passion, fans flock to the track at Suzuka knowing something memorable is bound to happen. Some of the events they have witnessed have been violent, while others have been more subtle. Some have resulted from a year's worth of rancor among the contenders for the World Driving Championship, while others were the product of a simple, spontaneous mistake. 5 times in 8 years, they have seen a championship won. Today, the fans have returned to Suzuka, and something is bound to happen. ESPN Speed World welcomes you to the penultimate round of the 1995 Formula One World Driving Championship. This is the Grand Prix of Japan. Hello again, everyone. I'm Bob Varsha. Welcome to the second straight race on the island of Japan, and what a difference. From the remote TI circuit in Aida in the mountains of southern Japan, we come to Suzuka International, part of a busy vacation area. In fact, the circuit is attached to an amusement park known as Motorsports Land. We'll take a look at the point standings coming into this round of the championship. The driver's title has been clinched, the second straight for Michael Schumacher. But in second place, Damon Hill will be looking over his shoulder, trying to hold off teammate David Coulthard, with Jean Alesi and Johnny Herbert just a handful of points behind. The championship at stake is the Constructors, in many ways the more important to the teams in Formula One racing. Benetton Renault leads Williams Renault, the 3-time and defending champions, by 21 points. If it's a 16-point margin or greater at the end of the day, Benetton Renault will walk off with a sweep of the 1995 titles. With me as ever, Derek Daly. Let's get right to the daily news.
There has been an unusual number of high-speed crashes this weekend. Mark Blundell's second crash of the weekend was caused by driver error, and this impact, very hard, left him in the cockpit and definitely stunned. Second big crash of the weekend, Aguri Suzuki here in the Ligier puts 2 wheels off the road, loses control, backwards into the barrier. His Formula One career is now over because he was about to announce his retirement today. Carl Wendlinger, after a promising test at Mugello in Italy, has one more chance to save his Formula One career. There is ongoing discussions with Richie Klein, president of the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, about a permanent home for the US Grand Prix at that fabulous new complex being built out there from 1997 on. Yamaha has unveiled its new V10 engine here. It is smaller, lighter, and revs to over 16,000 RPM. The rumor mill is saying that Chrysler is again looking at Formula One. Chairman Bob Eaton and President Bob Lutz, who are both motorsports fans, and perhaps enough time has now passed since their last effort to get involved was torpedoed by McLaren's Ron Dennis.
The field is now away on the formation lap. Let's check out, as soon as we take a look at the map provided to us by Fuji Television in Japan, who are also the title sponsors of this race. There you see the intermediates, the track broken down into 3 sections for timing and scoring purposes. And during the course of the race, you will see various cars in their intermediate times compared to the cars that they are battling with. As you can also see, it is a wet racetrack. It has been raining intermittently all morning long since the wet warm-up this morning. And we have another wet day at Suzuka in store for the 3rd straight year. Now let's turn to our Prestone starting grid for today's lineup. On the pole for the first time since Canada 10 races ago, Michael Schumacher, who has a shot at Nigel Mansell's record of 9 wins in a single season. John Alesi in the Ferrari will be alongside. Row 2, Mika Hakkinen, just 2 weeks off appendix surgery, is back in the McLaren Mercedes, with Damon Hill alongside in the Williams Renault. Row 3 will be Gerhard Berger of Austria in the Ferrari, and David Coulthard of Scotland in the second Williams Renault. Row 4 will be Eddie Irvine of Ireland in the Jordan. He has never been out of the points in this race. Heinz-Harald Frentzen will be alongside in the Sauber. Row 5 will be Johnny Herbert in the second Benetton, and the second Jordan, driven by Brazilian Rubens Barrichello. Row 6, Olivier Panis of France in the Ligier, next to Mika Salo of Finland in the Tyrrell, returning to the track where he started his career a year ago. Aguri Suzuki was to have been in the number 13 spot. Instead, row 7 will be Ukio Katayama of Japan in the Tyrrell and Gianni Morbidelli of Italy in the footwork. Row 8, Carl Wendlinger of Austria. Returning to Sauber Ford, Pedro Lamy of Portugal in the Minardi will be next to him. Row 9 will be Luca Badua of Italy in the Minardi, next to the footwork of Japanese Taki Inoue. On row 10, Andrea Montermini of Italy in the Pacific. He's been struggling with an infection this weekend, taking antibiotics, but he will race. Pedro Diniz of Brazil in the 40 Ford will be alongside. On row 11, Roberto Moreno, who was on the podium at this race for Benetton back in 1989, teamed with Nelson Piquet. Instead, he will be attempting to start his 44 from the pit lane, but he is having gearbox problems. It remains to be seen if Roberto Pupo Moreno will be able to get going today. Bertrand Gachot is back in the Pacific Ford. He will be starting alongside Moreno, and all alone on row 12 due to the odd number of cars with the failure of Suzuki to race, Mark Blundell of Great Britain, who had a terrible time trying to post a qualifier. And despite the fact that he is sore, he will race. Our top 6 in the warm-up: Hill, Schumacher, Coulthard, Alesi, Frentzen, and Irvine. 53 laps of racing to come. Pole man Michael Schumacher leads the column. He will be alongside Jean Alesi. The rest of the field comes into place for what will be a wet start.
And nobody taking a gamble. They are all on Goodyear's wet weather tires, so nobody towards the back of the grid prepared to take the gamble.
From high overhead, you see the rest of the field straggling into position. You can see part of that amusement park on the right. Here are our conditions: 64 degrees, negligible wind, but wet, wet, wet. A downhill blast to a very fast right-hander here at Suzuka. Remember, the green can come on anytime after the red light. Get set. Not a very quick green, but we are away. Schumacher and Alesi. Schumacher on the right, Alesi on the left. Here comes Mika Hakkinen. He will not challenge the Ferrari. The world champion for 1995 will lead the field into one. We have a spinner in the back at turn 2.
So Taki Inoue is the first of the spinners. We watched up as the faster boys went through the S's, so Inoue needs to get himself out of the way before this comes around.
Correction, that was Gianni Morbidelli, I believe, in that car. And there is Moreno, who was to have started from the pit lane. Apparently he will not. They're working on a semi-automatic gearbox, which is a part of everyone's equipment in Formula One, but they have not been able to complete a lap with it, and Moreno's race is run. That is too bad. Meanwhile, under the overpass, one of the few circuits in the world, right there you see it behind the Fuji TV banner, to have an overpass. It is a figure 8, or if you're from Europe, a figure of 8 track.
Or if you're from Europe, a flyover as opposed to an underpass. Schumacher said after the warm-up this morning, the most important thing is for me to get to the first corner ahead of Jean Alesi. He knows well how good these Ferraris handle with that nice V12 power band. And you can see already that it's beginning to dry out early in this first lap. Watch behind. That's the footwear car begins to lose it. Backs it, takes Karl Wendlinger onto the grass with him. Wendlinger didn't seem to make contact. And that's the end of the day for the Footwork Arrows car.
In the upper right corner of your screen, you see Japanese television showing you where the problem took place. Meanwhile, no problems whatsoever for Michael Schumacher, who actually has 2 shots at Nigel Mansell's single-season victory mark of 9. Down off the hill and onto the front straightaway to complete the first lap, and look at the gap Michael Schumacher is opening up.
And this is not the fastest part of this racetrack. This is 195 miles an hour before you brake. Double apex, long right-hander, all the way down to second gear as you exit. See Michael Schumacher slip and slide. But there is a back section that's even faster before you get to the chicane that we just saw earlier. And the chicane we can talk about later on, because you will see a very unusual curb design at that chicane.
The order at the end of the first lap: Schumacher, Alesi, Hakkinen, Hill, Irvine, Coulthard, then Gerhard Berger, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, Johnny Herbert, and Rubens Barrichello rounding out the top 10. Another look at the start.
Everybody was fairly disciplined. Now you see Mika Hakkinen begins to have a little poke down the inside, gets alongside Alesi, realizes he's not close enough. Look at the spray from about row 3 or 4 back. When you become unsighted, that can begin to cause some trouble. Maybe that contributed to Morbidelli going off the road.
At the top of the hill and plunging down, Michael Schumacher continues to draw away from the field, trying to put an exclamation point on his second straight World Driving Championship. Pretty much the best in the series right now. This ESPN Speed World presentation, the Formula One Grand Prix of Japan, is brought to you by Volvo. Volvo reminds you to drive safely. And by Firestone Retailers. Come in now during the sale of the season. We'll be back with more of the Grand Prix of Japan from the Suzuka circuit on a very wet day in the land of the rising sun. Stay with us. Grand Prix of Japan. Bob Varsha, Derek Daly with you. There is Michael Schumacher leading away as he has from the green light. Jean Alesi follows in the Ferrari, then Mika Hakkinen and Damon Hill.
And this is, as we said earlier, one of the finest racetracks, the classic road racing track, laid out, elevation changes. Look at Schumacher slide through there with understeer. There's the flyover. Down, turns right before he gets to the hairpin. Slowest corner on the racetrack, all the way down to second gear. Alesi takes a wider line, understeers in, keeps the car straight. But Schumacher in control over Alesi. He needed to get the lead, down to the spoon. This is a double apex left-hander, 180 miles an hour on the way in the dry. Third gear, down to second. Car begins to get away again, then you accelerate. Now you begin to wind it up to the fastest part of the racetrack. Almost 200 miles an hour in the dry up the hill before you go into this flat left-hander, then down to the chicane. Now, when we get down to the chicane here, watch the curbing on the inside of each of the apex points. Feel that high build-up? That has caused some controversy, trying to keep the cars off the racetrack. Of course, anybody that does manage to slip over it severely damages the underside of these carbon fiber monocoques.
Going around to complete lap 3. Still lots of water on the racetrack, as the rooster tail shows you. Schumacher with a lead of nearly 3 seconds over Alesi, then 8 seconds over Hakkinen. Hill, Irvine, and Coulthard follow in their order. The times are measured from the race leader. And once again, Schumacher sliding that car around. Here's a look at where Michael Schumacher stands. Last year he won 8 races. This year he has won 8 with 2 races left. Nigel Mansell's mark of 9 is the number to beat. But those 2 seasons, 94 and 95, have made Michael Schumacher the winningest driver in Formula One history over back-to-back Grand Prix seasons.
Down to Johnny Herbert running in 9th. This is 9th. 10th is Frentzen. Panis is 11th, and Mika Salo is running in 12th.
There are the top back-to-back seasons in Formula One history, and Michael Schumacher leads them with 16 victories. Everyone tippy-toeing around pretty gently.
You see the different line there by Damon Hill. Goes down the inside to see, can he squeeze past Mika Hakkinen. Back inside now with Damon Hill. You can see the track beginning to dry. Elevation changes. Again under braking. This is the spoon.
130 feet of elevation changes from the highest to the lowest points of this racetrack. As you can see, it's rather dry as well here in Japan in the autumn. Extra seats added for this race, bringing the total capacity to about 150,000. And for the first time in memory, this is the 9th running of the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. For the first time, it was not a sellout. Of course, it's been a busy year in Japan. There is a bit of a recession going on. Japanese Baseball World Series just concluded recently, as did our own in the United States. Congratulations to my Atlanta Braves. They also, of course, had back-to-back Grands Prix. Now, John Alesi in second place has picked up a jump start penalty. We understand Gerhard Berger, his teammate, will also be slapped. There it is.
So, this controversial start line system that is catching so many people out now catches the complete Ferrari team. Remember, if you stop and all 4 wheels of the car are stopped on the start line, if at any time after that you roll forward, even if the light has not gone green, even if you stop again, you are judged to have jumped the start. Even if you've stopped, remember, by the time the green light comes on. Very frustrating.
Alesi runs in second, Gerhard Berger in seventh, and both will be required to make a stop.
You can bet there will be some words afterwards, particularly with Alesi. He was very vocal this weekend about his team. Bob, we were surprised to see some of his comments after he had one of his crashes earlier. It almost sounded as if he blamed his team for not knowing or not telling him what happened to the car.
Lots of steering wheel input as Jean Alesi struggles with that Ferrari. Alesi said it is very difficult to drive when no one will tell you clearly what is wrong with the car. The team, for its part, says that they could find nothing wrong, and when they did eventually find that a pushrod had broken, that they thought it had happened after the crash or after Alesi went off. So lots of back and forth between Jean Alesi and his team. They will part ways following the season finale on the streets of Adelaide, Australia. And at the rate they are going, it will not be an amicable parting. So Alesi comes in to answer the black flag.
And I wish we could hear his radio. I wish we could plug in just to hear what he's saying now on the radio. What a frustration this can be for a driver. Everybody just barrels by. You now go right to the tail end of the field, and all the work you did during practice and qualifying is now pitched out the window because you have to now get in the middle of the mix here with drivers much, much slower than you were. And that looks as if he has gone down to at least 11th or 12th because Panis, we just saw him in the Ligier, was running 12th.
There is Gerhard Berger picking up spray from the car ahead. He will have a stop to make.
That's David Coulthard running in 6th place right ahead of him. David Coulthard not having a good weekend, having been so spectacular. Let's just listen to the Ferrari for a second.
Feathering that throttle, trying to get about 700 horsepower to a very wet and slick racetrack.
There's Alesi, joins the battle. That is Herbert 9th, 10th, 11th. And Herbert right in the mix there behind Heinz-Harald Frentzen. And it is a lot of work to do no matter how fast you are, because everybody knows he's been in the pit lane and they have no duty to make things easy. They are not obliged to move over at all. Rubens Barrichello just ahead of them in 7th. Again, trying to match the pace of his teammate who has so many miles, Eddie Irvine, so many testing and race miles here at Suzuka, having spent 4 years of his racing career thrashing around the racetracks of Japan, as many of these Formula One drivers have. Look at this! Woohoo!
Alesi had a notion about using that little bit. What that is the part of the pit entrance. And now Gerhard Berger comes in to serve his penalty. As Derek mentioned, they have built up the curbs in that chicane to try to keep cars from clipping the corners. Berger, for his part, jumped a high curb this weekend and destroyed the monocoque of his Ferrari. One of 3 or 4 cars that were written off during the practice and qualifying.
And we can presume that Berger will join at least behind Jean Alesi and Frentzen, who are now 9th and 10th. So by the time all this shakes out, the 2 red Ferraris have a lot of work to do.
A few empty seats in the grandstand, and why not? A general admission ticket for this race goes the equivalent of $160 US. We'll be back. Suzuka Circuit. Bob Varsha, Derek Daly with you as Jean Alesi slices up the inside of Johnny Herbert, trying to separate the Englishman from 9th, but he will not do it.
Oh, he didn't pull it off. There are only 3. Oh, down the inside of the high speed on the left-hander. That is a dangerous move. Remember Mansell in the Williams last year trying to pull that move off. Under braking here. He's back in the pits. He is in the pit lane. This is a gamble. He's about to take the first gamble here because he will be the first driver to go onto slick tires. Fights for the control of the Ferrari.
Dangerous thing to do in that very narrow pit entrance. The crew awaits with hot slicks.
He took the gamble at the Nürburgring and it almost paid off, and he's about to take a gamble here again. Running in 8th place, he'll be back down the grid, but he'll be the first man on wet weather tires, which he hopes will be a benefit in about 3 to 4 or 5 laps time. Oh, what a handful this is going to be now.
In case you're wondering why they did not do this when he was called in, you cannot make a pit stop while you're being called in to serve a time penalty.
And the key is to keep this baby on the black stuff until this track begins to dry out. He will get a good indication as to how long it'll be before he'll be competitive, because the cars that are screaming down behind him are on the wet weather tires. Meanwhile, Schumacher, he's all alone, in control, as the boys in his pit lane are getting ready to put him on dry weather slicks because it is no longer raining here.
Schumacher leads from Hakkinen, who took over 2nd place when Alesi pitted to serve his penalty. Damon Hill is 3rd now, Eddie Irvine 4th, David Coulthard 5th. Then Rubens Barrichello, Gerhard Berger, and the battle you watched moments ago, Alesi, Herbert, Frentzen, Salo, and so forth. Now Schumacher passes the pit in.
And Schumacher now fully recovered from a hangover. Yes, indeed, he had a drunken brawl of a celebration on Sunday night. Drank way too much beer, followed it by way too much wine, and by his own admission, couldn't even think of the World Championship by the time he laid his head on the pillow that night. Drunk as a monkey was there, Michael, and now fully recovered.
Looked out over a press room full of veteran journalists and said, "You must not mix beer and wine." Oh yeah, Michael, I'm sure that came as news to that crowd. Now Johnny Herbert pits. And he's not alone. It's going to be a very busy pit lane here for the next few minutes.
Interesting strategy here to bring Herbert in first. Perhaps that will be to judge how quickly he can go on the slick weather tire. Oh! He's off.
Alesi is off.
And did we just say it? The most important thing is that Alesi keeps this Ferrari on the black stuff, and that sure looked like a bit of a kiss of the barrier to me. Maybe it was just a simple spin. We joined it a little bit late on his in-car camera. Pieces of the car hanging off on the left-hand side. Is that tape or is that a piece of bodywork broken?
Hard to tell from here. Looks like it might be tape. Ooh. Last time we saw that at Monza, it turned out to be the wiring for his onboard cameras after one of them had fallen off and nearly beheaded Gerhard Berger in the process. Now here's another look.
Behind Pedro Lamy in the Minardi, Alesi tries to go around the outside. Oh, and he gets forced off. Look at this. Bucking Bronco over the sandpit. Does lose control, and Jean Todt chews on his toothpick and wonders, is there any damage done? But Alesi's hanging on here.
Whatever Jean Todt had for lunch is bubbling in his stomach now, watching his men bounce around. Now, word from the corners is that Gerhard Berger has also had a spin. We have not seen it yet.
Part of the gamble when you go on these dry weather tires. And here's a number 2 attempt to pass Pedro Lamy. This is a safe one. I think Lamy did see what happened and was a bit courteous here as Damon Hill peels off to the pit lane for Williams.
Slick tires going on the championship runner-up. A lot at stake for Damon Hill. Both he and his teammate David Coulthard were given a fairly severe talking to by the team's technical director, Patrick Head, following events last week at AIDA, Japan. Patrick Head berated the two for not getting enough out of the car, not being aggressive enough.
And of course, things got worse than they got here because Damon Hill was so disappointed. Here it is from in-car replay of, I believe this is Jean Alesi again. Loses it. Simple spin, bucking Bronco. Lucky he didn't kiss that tire wall. There's a complete 360 and gets on his way again. And one of them makes another pit stop.
I think that might be Gerhard Berger getting onto slick tires. Yes, it was, because that's Jean Alesi right there, still struggling to keep the pointy end forward. Jean Alesi, meanwhile, has set fastest lap. And in so doing, he's probably covered about an extra quarter of a mile or so going back and forth across the racetrack, some of it backwards. But that is his particular genius. And that is what has endeared Jean Alesi to Ferrari fans the world over. And that, in large part, is why they will mourn his absence next year when he and Gerhard Berger will go to Benetton.
His exciting style is something to watch, particularly in these type of conditions here. Now Schumacher, and that looks like him. Is that Schumacher beginning to peel off into the pit lane? So he is the last of the true front runners to make the stop onto slicks. He was over 11 seconds in the lead at one point. He said earlier that he wants Ferrari to finish as high as possible, not because he likes the team, 8.4 seconds, good stop, but because he wants Ferrari to take World Championship points away from this team here. Frank Williams' two boys, as David Coulthard peels off for his first stop. Hydraulic jacks lift the front, manual jack lifts the back. Just enough fuel, fills the tank again. Good stop for Coulthard. That means he won't catch anything on Michael Schumacher. Again, the key is to keep the car on the road in these difficult conditions on the outlap. There's proof that the gamble was worth it for Jean Alesi. Fastest laps now beginning to catch and pass a lot of those midfield runners that got in his way after that frustrating 10-second penalty.
Climbing the hill once again, Jean Alesi, whose girlfriend, whose name is Kumiko, a Japanese actress, that too has helped endear Jean Alesi to Japanese race fans. There you see Schumacher. Interesting story came up this weekend regarding Michael Schumacher. He made his debut, Alesi challenging Damon Hill for 5th place. Schumacher began his career with Eddie Jordan back in 1991, ran one race at Spa, didn't actually run the race, qualified 7th and was unable to start when the clutch broke. Jumped immediately to Benetton. Eddie Jordan sued him, saying he had a contract with Schumacher. This weekend, we found out that that lawsuit is still alive and kicking. Eddie Jordan refused to be drawn on it by journalists, but said that as far as he knows, and he of course is the plaintiff, that suit is still around.
Luca Badoer, who started 18th, currently 7th. Look at Alesi here, trying to get on the outside and pulls it off around the outside of Damon Hill to pull off 5th place. So Jean Todt now can begin to bite down on that toothpick, but Mika Hakkinen, who ran as high as 2nd before he makes his stop, and that was Eddie Irvine, in just ahead of him as we go on board the overhead shot of Mika Hakkinen's McLaren. He was the fastest man on the racetrack on Saturday morning's free practice session, which gave them lots of hope. Look at the steering wheel input. Let's listen over his shoulder. This is the S's.
We have to stop saying that. Every time we say we want to listen, we lose the feed. We'll just sneak up on them next time. Jean Alesi on his merry and madcap way for Ferrari. We'll step aside for a moment as you take a look at Ferrari's outside move under braking on Damon Hill up at the top of the hill in the chicane.
And you see him, Bob, get the rear end loose under braking, locks those rears and just pulls it onto line. And Frank looks through his eyebrows that his man gave up the position.
Meanwhile, Jean Todt gives his man an attaboy, in French no doubt. We'll be back to Japan in a moment. Of Japan, Michael Schumacher leads Jean Alesi, Damon Hill, Mika Hakkinen, Eddie Irvine, and David Coulthard as a rash of pit stops to move from wet to dry weather slicks have jumbled our order at the top of this field. While we were away, that man, Jean Alesi, reset fast lap. He's done it 3 times in the first 12 laps of this race.
And Alesi is absolutely driving like a man possessed. He's absolutely wild. He's already been off the racetrack, did a 360, flew through the air, went backwards, and he's traveling over a second a lap quicker than the race leader, Michael Schumacher, who's obviously being nice and careful. But could Jean Alesi reel him in here? 2 more races left for Ferrari as the Japanese day begins to come to an end as Katayama throws the Tyrrell into the guardrail, and the engine is stalled. He is there for the day. Jackie Inoue is now their only representative. And quite frankly, he's not much to cheer about.
Ukio Katayama made his 60th Formula One Grand Prix start today. By comparison, Damon Hill made his 50th. Hard to believe that Katayama has more starts than Hill, but that is the case.
Lost it at the S's. These are so fast and so difficult, and in these conditions, when you've just put slick tires on, here it is, he loses it on the way in. Nothing he can do except hang on. Look at the great job those tire walls do. Saves the car, saves the driver. Believe it or not, that crash that you saw Mark Blundell have earlier on, these carbon fiber monocoques are so strong that it did not destroy that monocoque. It was rebuilt, and Mark Blundell was able to use it. He is currently running in 17th place, having started last.
That was a 176-mile-an-hour crash for Mark Blundell. Now look at this. Flashing through a spot of water on the track. John Alesi is absolutely rocketing around this racetrack.
I mean, he is a man possessed. We have watched him fight with the steering wheel here, trying to keep this car in control. It was 4.2 earlier. It's not 4.2 now.
John Alesi started second on lap 3. He was second. Then he had to make his penalty pit stop for jumping the start on lap 6. He dropped back to 10th, picked up 4 places in 3 laps, and in the next 3 laps, another 4 places. 8 places in 6 laps to get to second place.
And just a little bit further back, 9th and 10th, is another Benetton Ferrari battle. Gerhard Berger didn't make his way through the difficult conditions as well as his teammate, John Alesi, but he still fights with the Benetton with Johnny Herbert. Whoa, you see that? As Coulthard flashes out past Eddie Irvine.
Very delicate first and second turns here. Downhill, right-handers. Very easy to get away from you.
Look at Barrichello trying to get by Eddie Irvine also. One of the 40 cars moves aside. That looked like Denise, but the 2 Jordan boys in a fight here. Remember, Irvine, so much more experience here. And John Alesi continues to reel in Michael Schumacher. We may have a real battle on our hands here. Schumacher's car, obviously, on slick tires, not as good as it was earlier when we saw him on wet weather tires. There it is. There's first, and there's second.
Climbing the hill, staying on that dry line. Michael Schumacher now surely knows that Alesi is closing.
Alesi wants to prove a point. He wants to go out in a blaze of glory. Has won one in Canada, was close to winning many more. Could have won Monza, could have won the Nürburgring, quite frankly, because that 7 seconds that he lost in 2 laps of the Nürburgring was a driver error. But he's beginning to reel the world champion in here, and nothing makes a man go faster than the sweet taste of victory, or a possible victory. 1:47, to give you an idea, that is still 9 seconds off the qualifying time. And as it dries out, Schumacher begins to creep away. It was 2.9, now it's 3.1.
This racetrack is owned by the Honda Motor Company. They do a lot of testing. In fact, the track has been here since Honda first began making cars. And the track was in fact built so that potential customers could come out here and see the cars in action, driving around. A couple of Formula One races held in the 70s, and then it was rebuilt in a major way to bring Formula One back in 1987. And in the 8 runnings of this race since the mid-80s, there has been so much history, so many dramatic moments. 5 drivers' world championships clinched here. Of course, that includes the first for Ayrton Senna, who stalled his McLaren Honda on the grid, dropped back to 14th place, then charged through the field to catch and pass his teammate Alain Prost and clinch his first Formula One World Championship under the eyes of Mr. Soichiro Honda, the late founder of Honda Motor Company.
Here's one of the braking zones. After this left-hander, into the chicane. At the end of this lap, they will flash across the line. Then you get an accurate time difference between Alesi and Schumacher, who looks as if he is closing up even more. Crashes over the curbs. Doesn't make any difference to him. On board with Rubens Barrichello following his teammate. You can see the elevation changes here down into the dip. The only Formula One car still to have a 7-speed gearbox.
Up to the chicane where Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost collided in pursuit of the championship back in 1989. Oh, a spin! And off the racetrack and hard into the tire wall. Make that concrete wall on the left. A major crash for Rubens Barrichello. And he is done.
Chasing his teammate, and suddenly it all gets away from him. He has not had a great season trying to match the pace of Eddie Irvine, and we were on board with him as it all went wrong for Barrichello.
There you see at the top of the hill at the chicane leading down onto the start-finish straightaway known as the Triangle Corner. And Gerhard Berger is being pushed into the Ferrari garage. So tremendous attrition here still in the first half of this Japanese Grand Prix.
He was running 8th, had managed to claw his way past Johnny Herbert in that Benetton, and Jean Todt's now down to one contender, and that one contender is a mighty fighter as Barrichello walks back to Eddie Jordan and thinks of what type of excuse he can give him.
We'll take this opportunity for a quick timeout, assuming nothing else happens in the next few seconds, and we will be back to Suzuka, Japan in just a moment. Suzuka Circuit International for the Grand Prix of Japan.
Testing. Oh, Frentzen is definitely faster, particularly under braking. Look at him jockey side to side. Slow on the exit, gives Eddie Irvine a chance to pull out about 2 or 3 car lengths. But down through this long double apex right-hander, after the start-finish line, Frentzen was quicker, and then down through the S's.
Let's take this moment to look back at what happened to Rubens Barrichello heading under braking for that same chicane.
Now watch him. He hits Eddie Irvine, knocks the rear wing off. Hopefully no damage to Eddie Irvine. Then he backs it into the wall. I don't think there was too much damage done to the car, but you see it here from the in-car. He gets into the braking zone, locks the rear. There it goes. Hits Eddie Irvine right there. We don't see it. Backs onto the grass. Gravel trap, grass, concrete. And excuse time.
Neatly parked against the wall. Rubens Barrichello is now out. 6 cars of our 23 starters are now out. Here are the top 6 in points and where they run. Michael Schumacher in his customary first place. Damon Hill runs 3rd. David Coulthard 5th. Jean Alesi in 2nd. And resetting fast lap virtually with every time around the circuit. Johnny Herbert runs 8th. And Gerhard Berger has climbed out of the Ferrari in the garage. His race is run.
And he climbed out in disgust and would not even talk to anybody, walked away because he retired with a misfire that was incurable. But Jean Alesi has no misfire here on this liking, particularly in the wet. And yesterday he ran on old tires on full tanks and said he thought the car was very well balanced then. Yet now we see Alesi beginning to pressurize the world champion. And it's about 2 or 3 tenths of a second per lap to reel him in. And hear him play with the throttle.
Next year, these men will exchange cars. Alesi will go to the Benetton. Michael Schumacher will go to the Ferrari. Coming up now on Luca Badois, who's running in a pretty strong 11th place. We're not used to seeing the Minardi up there.
Again over the curb. Watch the way Alesi uses that curb to pitch the back of the car around onto the line he wants the car to be on as he turns left. So using the curves to his advantage, and Schumacher clears Badoer 1.9 seconds as they flash across the start-finish line. Beginning to even out now a little bit, so Alesi has to be as decisive in traffic as Schumacher.
you like what you're watching, you can review the highlights on ESPN2's RPM Tonight. Coming up tonight, Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Kenny Mayne will be in the studios with highlights of this race. The Winston Cup at Phoenix, if Jeff Gordon clinches, or even if he doesn't, you'll see it on ESPN2's RPM Tonight, coming up tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on The Deuce. Flashing underneath, cars going overhead. Michael Schumacher leading Jean Alesi.
Still running about 7 to 8 seconds, and Frentzen obviously made contact with Eddie Irvine because he has broken the front wing of that Sauber. And where is Eddie Irvine? Oh, he's a long way back before he tries this outbreak maneuver. Very ambitious, tries to get away with it. Oh, he clouts Irvine, drop kicks him, puts him off the road. He keeps it running. Wheel spins, both rear wheels. That was a very ambitious move by Heinz-Harald Frentzen. You could see when he locked up the front brakes that he knew there was a no hope of pulling that off. And now suddenly he dropped way, way back the order.
Jean Alesi continues to stalk Michael Schumacher as they flash downhill in front of grandstands full of Japanese fans. And they come around to complete a lap as we approach the halfway mark of this race, going down at a pretty good clip considering the wet conditions. With a flick of the tail, the world champion leads Jean Alesi. We'll be back. At the Grand Prix of Japan, 1st to 5th. The time you saw on your screen, here is our running order. Schumacher, Alesi running very close together. Damon Hill is 3rd, Mika Hakkinen 4th, David Coulthard 5th, and Eddie Irvine remains in 6th, the final points-paying position, despite being involved in a tangle with Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Frentzen reported to the pits to replace the nose of his car. Meanwhile, Eddie Irvine soldiered on.
And the two fastest cars on the racetrack now. Here's a replay again of Frentzen trying to come inside Irvine. Watch him lock the front wheels. Look, locks the front wheels, the left front, the right still rotates, knowing that he's not going to make it. Eddie Irvine, thankfully for him, kept that engine running without any damage to that rear suspension. But the two fastest cars on the racetrack at the moment is Jean Alesi and David Coulthard. They are trading fastest laps at the moment, with Alesi having just resetted in his chase here of the youngest ever two-time world champion, back-to-back world champion.
In fact, Michael Schumacher took part in an auction of motor racing automobilia at the London Motor Show last week. He contributed a side pod off the Benetton, the same Benetton he collided with Damon Hill at last year's Australian Grand Prix. He autographed it, contributed it to the auction, raised $4,000 for the Down Syndrome Association, of which Damon Hill, his arch rival, is the patron. Damon's son, Oliver, suffers from Down syndrome, and Damon has done his part to raise tens of thousands of dollars for the Down Syndrome Association in Europe. Also at that auction, a steering wheel from one of the late Ayrton Senna's McLarens went on sale and was grabbed up for a mere $14,000, which we are assured is a record for a steering wheel.
And how much would you pay for a set of Damon Hill's overalls, driving overalls, or Michael Schumacher's? They were also auctioned. They made almost $6,000 a piece for the driving overalls. So very expensive memorabilia, and we believe Ayrton Senna's overalls made $55,000. Quite a collector's item.
Many of those items snapped up by Japanese collectors, some of them bidding over a phone connection. And it was 3:30 in the morning in Japan when all this was going down. So much for a recession in Japan. There you see the running order through 17th place. Only 17 cars remain of the 23 that started. And 10 are still on the lead lap.
So Jean Alesi seems to be able to close up when you get down through the S's and down to the hairpin. But then on the second half of this lap, Schumacher seems to go back into control again, and Alesi not quite able to get within striking distance. So maybe pit stops may begin to play an important part here, because we know how good the Benetton stops are. Can they continue to beat everybody in the pit lane as well as on the racetrack, or can Ferrari somehow, using pit stop strategy, help Jean Alesi get to the front? Oh, there's a telltale sign. There's a telltale sign now that tells Jean Alesi, I'm about to get my act together here. The track is just about dry enough for me to show the true potential of this Benetton with the Renault V10. And that will certainly dishearten Jean Alesi, who, for my money at the moment, is the driver of this race because of that 10-second penalty he served earlier that put him from second place all the way back to 16th.
Well, watching these guys thread the needle on that dry line at these speeds is really something to watch. Through the hairpin, hard acceleration coming up the hill. Looks like Alesi got over on the wet part. Or has Jean Alesi had a problem? Was that smoke out of the back of the Ferrari? I think it is.
Yes, it is. A telltale sign for Schumacher to Alesi, and now a telltale sign for Alesi to Jean Todt. Because the day is over, both Ferraris are out. Exactly what Schumacher did not want for the Constructors' Championship. He needed the Ferraris to take points away from the Williams cars. That will not happen.
Arm in the air, signaling he is slowing down. Jean Alesi will have to make a dive for the pit lane. Now he will pull it off, it appears.
That looked like oil coming out, so if he could see a trace of oil, he will pull it off the racetrack. Look how rough that grass area is offline. But the V12 engine, we haven't seen many of those blow up this year, but Damon Hill now moves over to second place. Mika Hakkinen is third. David Coulthard is fourth. Eddie Irvine now fifth. And the second Benetton, Johnny Herbert, moves into the top six.
One of the unique little bulldozers or tractors they use to move disabled cars around the circuit here in Japan. That also performs a pretty important function, getting between those corner marshals and the oncoming race cars. As Jean Todt walks back to the garage, his work on the pit wall is now finished, but it is only beginning back in the transporter. Getting back to that point about the corner workers, you will recall a year ago when the clouds opened over this racetrack in mid-race, Martin Brundle slithered off the track and clouded one of the corner workers, breaking a leg in the process. A very, very scary moment. No doubt they have all been briefed on that this weekend.
Alesi says, go ahead, take her away. Takes the steering wheel off to get out of the car. Puts it back on to get back in. But here's the battle. Schumacher is 20 seconds up the road from Damon Hill.
With that, we'll take a timeout and return for more of the next to last round of the 1995 season from Suzuka. Grand Prix of Japan. Great view of a chain link fence around the Suzuka circuit. You ride with race leader Michael Schumacher, who is suddenly a very relieved man, having just set fast lap of the race. He also knows that his immediate pursuer, Jean Alesi, has suffered engine meltdown in the Ferrari. And somehow Schumacher always seems to come out on top. He seeks to eclipse, or at least tie, before he can eclipse Nigel Mansell's single-season victory record of 9. He can tie it today and perhaps break it in a couple of weeks of the season finale on the streets of Adelaide, Australia, for which we expect a crowd of some 175,000 people in the final Formula One race on the streets of Adelaide before the Australian Grand Prix moves to Melbourne to begin next year. Now, this is a replay, I believe, of one of the Pacifics going off. Thank you very much, Fuji Television. That's Andrea Montermini, who is probably just as anxious to get out of that car. He's been suffering from a horrible sore throat all weekend due to an infection.
And this is David Coulthard beginning to reel in Mika Hakkinen. This is the best battle on the racetrack as we speak, as Schumacher slides down the inside of Heinz-Harald Frentzen.
He puts a lap on the German. That leaves us with 8 cars on the lead lap. Frentzen runs in 9th after that quick pit stop to replace the nose that he damaged in his altercation with Eddie Irvine.
Everything seems to go Michael Schumacher's way. Just when John Alesi looked as if he had a car that might be able to challenge him, it blows up. We've seen him earlier on this year start anywhere back to 16th on the grid. Whether it was wet or dry didn't make any difference. He still found a way to win. So as David Coulthard puts the pressure on Mika Häkkinen is only just under 6 seconds behind Damon Hill. On board with Mika. There's an impressive sight. Mercedes setting fastest lap.
There's Ron Dennis under considerable pressure. Lots of rumors that his Marlboro sponsorship may be on the fence if McLaren doesn't start winning on a regular basis soon. Ron says, I take full responsibility to make sure that happens. Mercedes brought a brand new engine to the track this weekend, or at least a development of their Ilmor-built V10s, and it has been magic with lots of mid-range grunt. Mika Häkkinen, as Derek mentioned earlier, has topped the timesheets this weekend on his return to Formula One. They are not racing with it at this point, however, but they are definitely making strides to return McLaren to its winning ways.
Ron Dennis also was furious this weekend at suggestions that Roger Penske may have a prominent management role to be played in the future of McLaren Formula One, McLaren International. He said, absolutely not. We have no interest in becoming involved in IndyCar, and Roger Penske has no interest in becoming involved in Formula One. We do not know whether that's true or not, as Mika Häkkinen peels off down the pit lane.
He hits the rev limiter to hold the car to the pit lane speed limit, 75 miles an hour here in Suzuka, and the crew goes to work.
We saw Ron Dennis come down from the pit wall in preparation for this pit stop. He is the leader of that team and the leader of the McLaren Formula One Road Car project, the leader of McLaren Tag Electronics division. He has been hugely successful since he took over with our expanded or merged project for his own team with McLaren, but he is under pressure now to produce results.
Coming up behind Taki Inoue, race leader Michael Schumacher. Here's a program note. Coming up later today, final round coverage of the Senior PGA Tour Hyatt Regency Nepali Classic from Maui, Hawaii. Mike McCullough leads by 1 over first-round leader Dave Stockton. Coming up later today, final round coverage of the Nepali Classic, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 2:30 p.m. Pacific. I bet you didn't know I could speak Hawaiian, Derek.
I know you can.
Aloha.
An interested spectator here this weekend is the owner of Tasman Motorsports. Steve Horn and his wife Christine are here to watch the action. Steve, of course, so successful this year as Panis takes the Ligier Mugen Honda into the pit lane. That's why Steve Horn is here, to visit Honda, to organize his engine program for next year. Steve Horn, of course, back in IndyCar so successfully this year, bringing Honda into the winner's circle one time this year and probably many times in the future.
In fact, the driver who accomplished that is here as well. Andre Ribeiro out kicking tires in the Formula One paddock. Michael Schumacher looking for his record-tying, potentially, 9th Grand Prix victory of the year. There you see, 18.9 seconds up the road from the second-place car of Damon Hill. We'll be back. Grand Prix of Japan, Damon Hill, who has had so much disappointment this year, runs in second place to, who else? Michael Schumacher. We are just past the halfway point in this 53-lap race.
Just think back to his superb performance last year when it rained, when he actually beat Michael Schumacher in a superb head-to-head battle. This morning, as we take a little peek back at his teammate David Coulthard, who was running in third place, so the Williams second and third, he will close in on the Benetton. You see the glowing red brake discs there, the carbon brake discs. Here's the field summary. But right now, Williams will make up some points in the Constructors' Championship on Benetton. If Schumacher, if he wins, really will help Benetton enormously. And at the end of this lap, we believe Michael Schumacher is prepared to make his second pit stop.
Ironically, the cars from Benetton and Williams, respectively, are running in the same positions as the ones they finished the last race in Aida, Japan in. Schumacher and Herbert running first. Well, I've changed that. Johnny Herbert has gotten around Eddie Irvine and runs fifth. While Damon Hill are second and third.
Radio contact so important during these races of changing conditions. We see Schumacher to Hill still 19 seconds, so Damon Hill did make up just a second in the last 4 or 5 laps. But that is not anything that you could hope will develop into a challenge. As Schumacher, does he peel off? Yes, indeed he does. Comes down, gives a hand signal to say that he's on his way down the pit lane. Knows that in 20 seconds, Damon Hill will go by. And this is Damon Hill. However, he has to make his second pit stop also.
Into the pit lane comes Schumacher, and the peerless Benetton pit crew will go to work.
They have been superb all year long. Brand new tires on that Benetton. That was the key to his win at Aida. And there's Damon Hill, comes down the outside and will take the lead for the first time this afternoon. And Michael Schumacher tries to sneak out ahead of Mika Hakkinen.
They'll come out behind Hakkinen. Schumacher took on an awful lot of fuel there. That was a long stop by Benetton standards, almost 12 seconds. So now,
was that Hakkinen or was that Mark Blundell? Hard to see as he went by the bottom of our picture there.
New race leader, Damon Hill, hoping to defend his title in this race.
Temporary new race leader, because remember, their stops were also in the 8-second bracket, so they did not have a lot of fuel. They did not take on a lot of fuel. Mind you, it was early in the race, so there was already half a tank full of fuel anyway.
So now Damon Hill has his work cut out for him. He has to make the most of this opportunity. He knows Schumacher is on comparatively cold tires, and he is running with a full load of fuel. So Damon Hill must use this opportunity to put as much ground between himself and Schumacher as he can in preparation for his next stop. The track is fairly long, 3.4 miles.
Just look how low, Bob, the center of that monocoque is to the ground. In fact, in practice, he had an interesting situation because they ran the car so low to the ground, it created so much friction, it actually scorched his behind because the wood got so much heat into the carbon fiber floor of the car. So we learned exactly how low he could run that Williams and exactly how low he couldn't run that Williams.
Action in the Tyrrell pits. This would be Mika Salo, who began his Formula One career here a year ago and is one of a handful of drivers in this race who knows this track intimately. He raced here for 4 years before beginning his Grand Prix career. Mark Blundell getting attention in the McLaren pits.
Still stiff and sore after that impact. Had a big crash Friday. They repaired the car. Had a huge crash Saturday. They could have repaired the car, but Professor Watkins, the traveling Formula One doctor and McLaren's own physiotherapist, made the decision that Mark should not, in fact, attempt to qualify on Saturday afternoon. That was why, of course, he started all the way at the back of the grid.
We've talked at length about the silly season. We know where many of the top drivers are going next year. We speculated that we would not see them in those cars until after the 31st of December, the traditional drop deadline for Formula One contracts, but that may not be the case. Our understanding this weekend is that many of the top teams have agreed to allow their drivers to begin testing for their new teams. So we expect on November 20th at Estoril, Portugal, to see Williams with a lineup of Hill and Villeneuve, Benetton with Alesi and Berger, and Ferrari with Irvine and Schumacher to be testing together. And that will be very interesting to see. Damon Hill has the race lead, but he needs to keep his right foot planted. He leads Schumacher, Coulthard, and Hakkinen. We'll be back to Suzuka. ESPN Speed World presentation, the Formula One Grand Prix of Japan, is brought to you by Toyota Motorsports. Our minds are always racing. Back at the Grand Prix of Japan, Bob Barsha, Derek Daly with you. 33 laps of 53 are complete, and Damon Hill leads Michael Schumacher by just under 10 seconds. David Coulthard, 14 and a half seconds behind the leader, followed by Mika Hakkinen, Johnny Herbert, and Eddie Irvine in the top 6 points-paying positions.
And that 9 seconds will become less and less as these laps roll on, because Michael Schumacher just set fastest lap of the race at a 42.9, which is still more than 4 seconds off the pace of qualifying. You can see why, because of all those damp patches as Damon Hill peels off for David Coulthard peels off for his pit stop.
Incredibly narrow pit lane here in Suzuka. Coulthard comes in under the paired flags of the Union Jack and the Tricolor, Great Britain and France. Britain for the chassis, France for the engine.
Is that tricolor or tricolor?
Tricolor, mon ami. Engine stuttering on the rev limiter as Coulthard leaves the pit lane. Meanwhile, Michael Schumacher, running in second place, has Pedro Diniz up ahead. This is just what Damon Hill wanted. And, of course, Michael Schumacher wastes no time at all with slower traffic.
Of course, Michael Schumacher now has the respect of people like Diniz, because when they see him in their mirrors, they simply pull off the racetrack, which was something that Ayrton Senna enjoyed for many years. He intimidated people as soon as he filled their mirrors, and they literally moved over and waved him through. We just saw Diniz do exactly the same thing.
Down to the Spoon corner.
That was Hill running through, and that was second place. Damon Hill will have to make another pit stop. Locks up that right front on the way to enter that right-hander piece of the pit lane. Very narrow, as Bob said earlier. Schumacher now down to the chicane, so no hope of Damon Hill hanging on to the race lead.
You almost sense that Damon Hill knew it coming in, which is why he overcooked that corner at the pit entry. Listen for the sound of Michael Schumacher.
That's him. There he goes.
Damon is down and back underway, but it will not be enough. With 18 laps remaining, Michael Schumacher finds himself out front again.
And now it might become a battle between the teammates as Damon Hill comes out just right ahead of Olivier Panis, or Olive as the team affectionately know him as. No word yet whether he will stay in the Ligier seat next year. Rumor mill has it that Ligier are interested in pursuing Pedro Diniz. Why? Well, because he might have as much as $8 million of financial backing from a conglomerate of Brazilian sponsors. So that will certainly pave the way for Diniz if he does have that big a chicken's neck.
Well, we could get a couple of them to sponsor our programs. We could all make lots of money. From high overhead to some dank skies above the Suzuka circuit. These long shots are great. They give you an idea of just how fast these cars are going, to watch just a tiny speck rocketing around a ribbon of racetrack. There's the running order. Schumacher having taken over from Damon Hill on Hill's pit stop. Coulthard runs third behind his teammate. Hakkinen, Herbert, and Irvine. 2 Williams cars and 2 Benettons in the points. Take this opportunity to check out our Haviland race recap. Michael Schumacher, as mentioned, is the race leader, has led for a couple of laps since taking over. 4 lead changes among 3 drivers. Flavio Briatore, who runs the Benetton team for Luciano Benetton, looks on. Cars out of the race. There are 7 of them. Make that 8 of them. Make that 9 of them as Pedro Diniz parks the 40 Ford alongside the tire wall.
So much development has gone on with that team this year. And I suppose you'd have to say they've done a reasonably good job with Roberto Moreno and Pedro Diniz. But a $7 or $10 million budget now in Formula One will only just get you on the back of the grid. About $25 million will get you to the middle of the grid, $30 million gets you into the top 10, and $50 to $100 million, that is 50 for the cars and 50 for the engine program, gets you to be a winner and a contender for the World Championship.
Without taking anything away from your point, no amount of money will get you on the grid next year if you are not up to speed. The 107% rule will come into play. If you are not within 107% of the pole sitter's time, your position on the starting grid will be in jeopardy if, in fact, it exists at all. Well, Damon Hill is off the racetrack. Keeps the fire. He's got a long way to go if he's going to drive around that gravel trap.
Well, Patrick Head won't be amused at this sight because he's already, as you mentioned earlier, had a word with Damon. Long way around on the dirt track to try and get himself back onto the racetrack. David Coulthard just flashes by as they drag Diniz off the racetrack. Mika Hakkinen flashes by, so he is at least down to 5th place, if not worse. At least down to 5th, and has he done damage to that Williams? Does he have to go back into the pit lane? Remember, yes he does. He doesn't like something. Doesn't look bad. We can't see anything broken.
Probably needs more fuel after that trip around the gravel track. So another frustration piled on a very frustrated racing driver at this point. As Damon Hill comes in, the crew will change tires. Looks like they will put a new nose on it as well.
Have a good look at the suspension, because when you go off and start to bounce in the air that high, you can break the brittle carbon fiber pieces that makes up that nose and the underhanging wing, and that is what is wrong. So now Eddie Irvine should move up, Johnny Herbert will move up, and Frentzen will now move into the 6th place points battle. So Frank Williams can only think about the World Constructors title now beginning to slip from his grasp. Remember what Damon Hill said? That he needed a miracle with about 3 or 4 races to go. Well, now Frank Williams probably thinks the same thing. Here it is in slow-mo. Well, that was a funny place to lose it. Whoa! Launches himself off that curb and bounces high through that gravel trap. Now, that gravel trap is plowed to try and arrest the speed of these cars that get into it at about 140 or 50 miles an hour. But when it's wet, as Mark Blundell takes a trip through the gravel trap also, when the gravel traps are wet, they become very hard and they do not soak up racing cars and do not dissipate energy. That's why you see so much flying through the air.
Blundell went off at the same place. I wonder if there's oil down at that corner. We'll be back to Japan in a moment. Grand Prix of Japan. There you see Damon Hill, who just took a mighty launch over the curbing down in the spoon corner. Very high-speed left-hander, and flew into the gravel trap. Got the car back on the track, made a stop at the pits for a new nose and new tires on the car. Is back out. He runs in 5th place behind this man, Michael Schumacher, David Coulthard, Mika Hakkinen, Johnny Herbert. Here's another look.
Now, what's the launch? I think there's oil or something on the racetrack. What's the launch off the curb here? Just watch this. There's the curb. Look at the launch. Now watch it again here. Now he's in the plowed part of the gravel trap. Watch this here. Up in the air. Banged. Crashed through the air again. These cars are amazingly strong when they're in a flat position. They don't break into pieces. Yet, on a slight touch sideways, side-to-side contact with the racing car, you can break the suspension off. Mark Blundell had exactly the same ride on the same lap, which definitely suggests there is some sort of moisture on that racing line which has caused that trouble.
Down under the overpass, heading down for the hairpin. Schumacher will be approaching that spoon curve in just a moment. Uphill right-hander. And now flying down into the corner where Damon Hill just had his problem. coming up right here.
We can only presume that at this stage, having seen 2 cars fly off the road, that the flag marshals have the yellow flags out there to warn everybody, as Wendlinger, who was on his last chance to save his Formula One career, makes his way back out, and he was not in the top 10. He was 11th before he made that pit stop.
1 lap down.
Let me expand a little bit on what I mentioned earlier about the Las Vegas International Speedway. David Coulthard is off in the same position, exactly the same corner. So undoubtedly there is something on the racing line that is causing these cars to fly off the racetrack. I don't see any damage. So maybe David Coulthard can simply continue on. But what a rough ride that is for these. Oh, he's in all sorts of trouble.
Ooh, and hard into the tires. David Coulthard, who has been mesmerizing in the second half of the season, including 4 straight pole positions, lots of podiums, a threat to Damon Hill for the runner-up spot in the Drivers' Championship, but all that is probably pretty academic right now.
And I'm not sure any of this was David Coulthard's fault, as Frank looks on, because it probably was not his fault that he went off the road in the first place. And I'm sure Fuji TV will give us another replay of the second incident David Coulthard had, because as he got into the braking zone, suddenly a huge cloud of sand and stones and gravel came out of the Williams. Here we go again.
Same place.
This is probably Wendlinger. Is it Wendlinger?
I think it's Frentzen.
It is Frentzen. So the Spoon Corner claims a 4th victim here.
There's a bit of debris or a piece of the car flying off.
And it has to be oil down there. Oh no. Damon Hill is about to complete Frank Williams' day of joy, because he's running 4th. That is some constructors' points, and Frank is now being told that Damon has a 10-second penalty from Patrick Head, who also looks disgusted, as the Williams challenge for the Constructors' Championship is a complete shambles.
Frank Williams, to whom, as you have mentioned so many times before, Derek, having driven for him, the Constructors' title is the one that really matters.
It is more important to him than the driver's title. And quite frankly, now it's over. Both of the Sauber cars are in at the same time. A traffic jam.
Take a number.
See the Williams boys run down to the bottom of the pit lane. That's where the digital clock will count down as 10 seconds. Or Damon Hill runs in 4th right now. Will slip all the way out of the top 6 spots. Now watch what happens, David Coulthard, here under braking. There's the brakes. Dumps all the sand. He's a passenger from then on. Loses traction on the rear wheels. And the unfortunate David Coulthard slams the Williams sideways into the wall as Damon Hill, and another one off with a spoon.
And that is Damon Hill.
Well, forget the 10-second penalty now.
And forget the Constructors' Championship. Flavio Briatore can smile. Quick look back over his shoulder to make sure Frank Williams can't see him while he does it.
And Bob, is it ironic that the world champion Michael Schumacher doesn't seem to fall into these difficult situations? Is that the measure of a champion who can read the road and read the conditions just that little bit better than his opposition? Certainly, this would suggest that it does, that he can read the conditions better than his opposition.
Well, it's what folks always used to say about Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna. It never seemed to happen to them. And I don't think it was a coincidence. We'll be back to Suzuka. Of Japan, here's a look at what happened to Damon Hill moments ago, taking the second Williams Renault out of the race and thereby clinching the Constructors' Championship for the Benetton team.
I think he spun on somebody else's dirt. There it is right there. He runs over somebody else's shrapnel that they brought out onto the racing line, and Damon Hill helplessly backs the Williams off the racetrack, and Frank takes a deep breath and says, pack it up, boys, let's go home. Here's David Coulthard. What's the braking? That's it. Braking, throws out a couple of ton of sand and stones, bounces the Williams off the backwards, crashes into the tire wall. Whoa, within a lap, we had both Williams cars in the guardrail. Here's a replay again. I don't believe this was all David Coulthard's fault. Certainly this one was not, because all that excess baggage that he dragged from the last trip through the gravel trap caused his second incident.
Well, with that, Williams-Renault has become the Beach Boys. And with 10 laps remaining in this Grand Prix of Japan, Michael Schumacher continues to see nothing but rainbows. In 10 laps, if he can stay out front, he will tie Nigel Mansell's single-season win record with his 9th of the year. I want to remind you, coming up today at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, finals of the ATP Eurocard Open from Essen, Germany. Great tennis action. Thomas Muster beat Pete Sampras in the semis yesterday, so it'll be Thomas Muster against Malavia Washington, who set down Andre Agassi, number 1 in the world, earlier in this tournament. Muster has won 11 titles this year. He looks for his 12th against Malavia Washington today on ESPN at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific. And now the sun begins to poke through. Above Suzuka Circuit International, Mika Hakkinen rocketing around 2 weeks off his appendicitis surgery. In fact, there's been a lot of joking in the pit lane about how cutting off his appendix has made Mika a little bit faster. Maybe if we cut off some other parts, it'll be quicker still.
Oh, yeah? He's having a great run here for the McLaren. Just think, if anything happened to Michael Schumacher, Mika Hakkinen could have his first Grand Prix win. Let me quickly get back to something I mentioned earlier about Las Vegas. There is an enormous new racing complex being built in Las Vegas. I say enormous. There are 24 different racetrack configurations. And Bernie Ecclestone has been in Richie Klein's office in Las Vegas discussing the possibility of moving the U.S. Grand Prix not to the streets of Las Vegas, but to Richie Klein's complex, which is a 2.5-mile FIA-approved road course inside his super speedway. What a complex that will be. Perhaps that will be the chance for Formula One to truly return in style to the U.S.
This brings up a good point. Bernie Ecclestone, who runs Formula One, is not here, has not been here for either of the Japanese races. Speculation is he is in the United States not only talking with the organizers at Las Vegas, but also talking with major American corporations about sponsoring the event. And one of the ones he is supposedly speaking to is McDonald's, which has taken a very high profile in racing in the last year or two. Although that will certainly lead to some kind of jokes, I suppose, about the wine and cheese set from Formula One dining on Big Macs in the paddock at Las Vegas.
As we go back to Eddie Irvine, who is well known around these parts for his off-track activities and for his on-track activities. Eddie Jordan himself said half of Tokyo knows the reputation of Eddie Irvine. A good old Irishman. Will move to the Ferrari team and is anxious to get into that car as soon as possible, relishing the thoughts of partnering Michael Schumacher, who is about to put a lap on him. Eddie Irvine is 4th, so Michael Schumacher may lap everybody up to 3rd place. What a team this is. But how different will this team be next year when the drivers change and when Ross Brawn, their designer, possibly leaves to go to Ligier?
Therein lies a story. We'll tell it to you when we come back. Suzuka Circuit. Suzuka Circuit. It's not a line from Dr. Seuss. Bob Varsha and Derek Daly with you. Michael Schumacher leads, as he has so often this year, with just a handful of laps remaining, en route to a possible 9th Grand Prix victory of 1995. No sign of any distress whatsoever in his driving as he goes through Spoon Corner that has taken 4 cars off the racetrack to date. Let's get back to what you were saying a moment ago, Derek, about what a team Benetton will be in 1996. This weekend, Tom Walkinshaw, who is the technical director for Benetton and also runs the Ligier operation, was asked point blank what his plans are for next year. Where will he be? All Tom would be drawn on was Benetton will be a very different squad next year, and it would certainly be nice to take a team like Ligier and help it to take the next step up. Is that enough answer for you, Flavio?
Yes, indeed. He will move away from any management association with Benetton and will take over the more prominent role at Ligier. And just remember, every single racing team that Tom Walkinshaw has become involved with at a high level, he has brought to success. And he believes that he can make Ligier a world championship contender and a possible world championship winner in the years to come. But you know, one of the missing pieces of the puzzle, he is looking for the next young potential Michael Schumacher of the future. He believes that's a part of the puzzle he does not have his finger on yet, and that is a vital part of his team's building process.
And they will be conducting a cattle call later this year to test some young drivers in the Ligier and see what they come up with. Speaking of winners, coming up at 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time, the best NFL pregame show on television, NFL Game Day here on ESPN with Chris, Tom, Joe, and Sterling. Among the topics they'll be discussing, the debut of Deion Sanders as a Cowboy, with or without a contract. The 49ers' Ken Norton Jr. reunited with his dad recently. That's a great story. What has happened to the Dolphins? All this and more coming up on NFL Game Day. Chris Berman, Tom Jackson, Joe Theismann, Sterling Sharp. Did I say Tom Jones? He was a singer, wasn't he? Well, Tom Jackson's a pretty good singer, actually. Anyway, they're all coming at you at 11:45, so don't miss it. Mika Hakkinen in the McLaren Mercedes. Hakkinen runs in second right now. We'll have to do a quick check. That would be his best performance of the year, and certainly the best that McLaren has seen in some time. You see Olivier Panis, who has moved up into a position to pick up 2 championship points. He runs 5th, just behind Eddie Irvine, and just ahead of Mika Salo, who has the Tyrrell Yamaha up in the points. And that will bring some smiles out in the grandstand. There's a look at the top 6 in the Drivers' Championship and where they run. Schumacher in first, Hill, Coulthard, Alesi, and Berger all gone. Johnny Herbert
To get out of this racetrack as soon as this race is over.
And it is such a tough break. We'll hear in Australia about all the miserable times they had in places like Bali, Tahiti, New Zealand, up on the Gold Coast of Australia, mate. And a World Championship party will certainly break out in Adelaide, Australia in a couple of weeks' time. And we'll be here to bring it to you. Meanwhile, the Japanese Grand Prix rolls on. Japanese Grand Prix, problems on the racetrack just ahead of Mika Hakkinen, with whom you rode just a moment ago. That is Pedro Lamy, who's had an interesting day already.
The man who missed 15 months of his career after that terrible crash in the Lotus car at Silverstone when he had a rear wing brake, broke both his legs. And quite frankly, I think he has done a remarkable job coming back this year with the Minardi team. Was running 11th, may still hold on to that 11th place despite that short spin. And Mika Salo still brings a smile to Ken Tyrrell's face. He is in the points. Here it is here. Lamy simply missed the second part of the chicane, gathers dirt and stones on his rear tires, has a harmless spin, keeps the engine going, and everything is clear. Ooh, Salo's under threat here. That is Frentzen trying to close up.
Salo's immediate future is a new V10 engine from Yamaha. It is up on the dynos at John Judd's Engine Development Concern in England. As is usual with Formula One, you ride with Eddie Irvine. The new engine will be smaller, more compact, lighter, and make more horsepower, revving higher up to 16,000 RPMs in the Yamaha next year.
Known as the OX11A or OX11A, of course OX10C. The C version of the OX10 is what's in the cars this weekend here. It is reliable, but it's not powerful.
Down to the last 3 laps in this race. Michael Schumacher, as ever, not putting a wheel wrong. Schumacher was sitting in on the press conference at which Mika Hakkinen spoke in fairly graphic terms about his appendix operation. Actually, the most graphic description of what they did not do to Mika Hakkinen, all the stomach muscles they did not have to cut through and all that sort of thing using modern surgical techniques. And Michael Schumacher, for all of his bravery on the racetrack, turned several shades of green during Hakkinen's discussion of his surgery. And I wasn't sure he was going to make it through.
Hakkinen has a good opportunity here to equal his best finishing position of this season. He was second at Monza. A superb run there. Second, potentially here this afternoon. But what a demonstration again by Michael Schumacher. The ease with which he seems to win Grand Prix races is quite remarkable. He now is within striking distance of equaling Nigel Mansell's record of 9 wins in a Grand Prix season, and has to go to Adelaide with all the confidence and all the tools you would ever need to set a new Formula One record for the number of wins in a single season. A remarkable run Schumacher has had in the last 2 years, and it's really good for him and a shame for us that his era has come when there is no Nelson Piquet, no Nigel Mansell, no Prost, no Senna to challenge, because what a battle that could have been with some of those established stars.
Of course, it's not easy to do what Michael Schumacher does, or the rest of these drivers for that matter. Bearing up under G-forces as many as 3.4 Gs on this racetrack. And that, of course, is just lateral Gs in corners, not to mention over 4 Gs in braking forces and 2.5 or so in acceleration on this very quick racetrack. A phenomenal athletic endeavor, driving a modern Grand Prix car at the very limit. And no one does it better than Michael Schumacher, who draws closer to his 9th Grand Prix win of the year. We'll be right back. Back at Suzuka, Japan, as Mika Hakkinen continues in second place at the Grand Prix of Japan. Bob Varsha, Derek Daly, glad to have you with us. Ron Dennis has a right to be a little bit relieved as his man Mika, in whom he has placed so much trust and investment in the last couple of seasons, is making good today, running in second to this man, Michael Schumacher, going for his 9th Grand Prix win of the year. Oh, that's Johnny Herbert right there, running behind one of the footwork cars. That would be Taki Inoue. Inoue runs in 12th, about to be lapped by Johnny Herbert, who runs in 3rd. So another podium for Johnny Herbert as he runs out the string with the Benetton team. No word as to where Johnny will be driving next year. There's Eddie Irvine with his teammate of 1996 at Ferrari, Michael Schumacher, bearing down from behind.
And I think Schumacher is obviously backed off because he is not that interested in lapping Eddie Irvine. The last man to try to lap Eddie Irvine here in a difficult situation was Ayrton Senna 2 years ago. And Eddie Irvine ended up getting a clip around the ear for that. But that won't happen here. But Schumacher quite content to stay behind his future teammate as he starts the final lap on his way to equaling the Formula One record for the number of wins. And all the boys want to join in the celebration.
Somewhere in the English-speaking world, Nigel Mansell is no doubt looking on as his record of 9 wins in a season is about to be matched, with one chance remaining for Michael Schumacher to break it in the season finale on the streets of Adelaide. Ironically, a 17th race was added to the normally 16-race Formula One calendar this year. That because of a certain amount of question over whether or not the races at Monza, at Aida, Japan, which took place a year ago, and at the Hungaroring would actually take place. So rather than coming up frightfully short, an extra race was added. And it will provide Michael Schumacher with the opportunity to win 10 Grand Prix races in a season, something no man has ever done before. He will also take over the statistical mantle of winningest driver in Formula One history over 2 seasons.
We've seen lots of mishaps This weekend, another mishap befell Goodyear engineer Janet Melia, where in Aida, she ended up with a cast on a broken arm. Well, we think it's broken because depending on which Japanese doctor you speak to, one says it's broken, the other says it isn't. So get well soon, Janet, as Michael Schumacher waves. It's all over.
Flavio Briatore with his cap on backwards. Fist in the air to welcome his man home. Once again, Michael Schumacher has done it with a combination of incredible skill, matchless pit strategy, tremendous mechanical reliability, and whatever else you care to name. He is the whole package in 1995. There is Mika Hakkinen, who will pick up second place. A spectacular performance for the McLaren Mercedes team as they try to work their way back to competitiveness, matching Mika Hakkinen's best performance of the year. Finishing unofficially in third, Johnny Herbert, punctuating Benetton's first Constructors' World Championship with two drivers on the podium.
That was a quick graphic of Mika Salo, who just beat Mark Blundell for that final points paying position. So McLaren overall had a superb day with second, and then Mark Blundell came from last on the grid all the way up to seventh.
Flavio Briatore conducting an interview on his way to the podium, where we will see our top finishers in just a moment. There is Johnny Herbert. Congratulations to him. He'll be back. This ESPN Speed World presentation, the Formula One Grand Prix of Japan, has been brought to you by Texaco Haviland Formula 3 Motor Oil. Add more life to your car. Take it to the star. And by the Rude High Efficiency 90-plus gas furnace. You can rely on Rude. Back at Suzuka, Japan, here's a look at the results of the Grand Prix of Japan for 1995. Michael Schumacher, with his 9th win of 95, ties Nigel Mansell's all-time single-season win record in Formula One competition. Mika Hakkinen matches his best of 95 in second, and Johnny Herbert in third puts two Benettons on the podium, accentuating their first Constructors' title. Eddie Irvine, Olivier Panis, and Mika Salo round out the 6 points-paying positions. Only 6 other cars classified as finishers, among them Carl Wendlinger, doing himself a good service in his efforts to keep his Grand Prix racing career alive, bringing the Sauber home in 10th spot. As our top finishers mount the podium, Derek Daly, Michael Schumacher, simply looking bulletproof at this point.
There's no doubt that Benetton will find it difficult to fill the huge void left when Michael Schumacher takes his considerable talent to Ferrari for next season. And if he is as good as he looks, particularly today, when he seems to just stay away from all the problems and make it look easy, if he's that good, perhaps we are looking at a man who may win 3 world championships in a row, starting again with Ferrari next year.
Mika Hakkinen looking very relieved to bring McLaren back to the podium, where they have spent so much time in the past. Here's a look at the Drivers' Championship points. Schumacher, of course, had clinched coming in, but a great battle for third between David Coulthard, Johnny Herbert, and Jean Alesi, all bunched within 7 points. In the Constructors' Championship, it is official. Benetton Renault knocks off the 3-time defending champs from Williams Renault. And an interesting battle there will go to the streets of Adelaide, Australia for the finale. McLaren, Jordan, Ligier, and Sauber, all very closely bunched indeed. Johnny Herbert, who has had such a spectacular season, including his first 2 Grand Prix wins, he will be out of a job next year. Checkered flag coverage of this race is coming your way Sunday, December 3rd at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Pacific. And the final Formula One event of the year, the Grand Prix of Australia, will take place 2 weeks from now on Sunday morning, November 12th, on a tape-delayed basis, coming your way at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 a.m. Pacific, and I guarantee you will want to be with us for that. We will have a re-air of today's Grand Prix of Japan broadcast Monday night at 12:30 a.m., actually Tuesday morning on the East Coast, 9:30 p.m. Pacific Time, Monday night, the 30th. Off we go to Australia for what should be a great race. Coming up next here on ESPN, the Edge NFL matchup. Be sure to stand by for that. I'm Bob Varsha for Derek Daly. We hope you've enjoyed the race as much as we have, bringing it to you. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time in Adelaide, Australia. Until then, for Derek Daly, I'm Bob Varsha. So long, everyone.